It is such an honor to be here with all of you. So thank you for spending a Wednesday evening with us. But the things that we're going to talk about are the kinds of things that tend to make people a little bit nervous. And at first I was like, can I say sex on stage with a bunch of women? But you all said vagina, so I guess I'm fine. Because the reality is parents are more likely to talk to their kids about sex than they are about money. And that's a huge problem, especially when we think about women and what that means. And if you think through, I'm sure many of you here have worked really, really hard. You've had an amazing career. You saved money. Yet most of us still feel nervous when we go into a bank or when we try to negotiate our term sheet if we're an entrepreneur, and even just negotiating a wage and a raise. And there are a whole host of reasons why. But my hope and what we're going to talk about doing today is being bold and being comfortable talking about money and finance and wealth. And that is okay for us as women to talk about. So I want you to think for just a minute about your earliest memories of money. What comes to mind for you? Yeah, pocket money, piggy banks, right? Don't talk about it. Exactly, I know. This is what happens a lot. 25 cents an hour. Oh my goodness, right? And then a lot of these things end up being intentional or unintentional, especially if the message is don't talk about it. Be a good girl. That's not an appropriate thing. But the reality is kids form their opinions of money and wealth by about age 8. So if we aren't talking about it, where is that coming from? It's coming from observing things with our neighbors, with our families. It's coming from hearing where people are stressed or excited. And it's coming from media and entertainment, which I don't know. I think the Gen Z, those of you that are in here, you think you have to have $600,000 a year to be happy? Like, that's a lot of money. I don't know very many people who make it, right? So it is important to talk about these sorts of things. So let me tell you a little story about why I care so much about this. And I have an awesome picture for you. This is me when I was 12. It's a very awkward age. My family was very into the 90s, as you can tell. And my dad was an entrepreneur. He didn't go to college, and my mom was an educator, which is so funny how things repeat themselves because I'm an entrepreneur and I'm also an educator. But I remember coming home from school in 6th grade, and my great-grandmother and my great-aunt and my grandmother were there, and my mom was really upset, and she did not want my sister and I hearing what was happening. So, of course, we wanted to hear what was happening. And we noticed some neighbors came by our house, and instead of stopping to visit like they normally would do, they actually just dropped off groceries. And I was like, this is weird. What's going on? Well, it turns out my dad, who's an amazing, loving, trusting human being, but doesn't always believe in contracts, had a business deal fall apart, and all our money was gone. My mom had gone to the bank. There was nothing in the bank accounts. All her credit cards were not being accepted, and she didn't know what she was going to do because she'd stayed home with me since I was born. Those of you who know me, you'll be like, oh, this is so Christy and how she has ended up being who she is. So my mom went back to work, and I was like, I can work too, right? At 12, you can babysit, you can dog walk, you can water flowers, and you can make sure the money sits in your piggy bank where mom can take it out and put an IOU in its place, and it's okay if it doesn't get paid back. And that was kind of my middle and high school experience, which is a very awkward young age anyway. And then fast forward, I'm from Ferndale. Anybody know where Ferndale is? Oh, nice. Yeah, it's north of Bellingham. It's not Blaine. People used to be excited because there's a Sonic drive-in that used to be there. That was pretty great. No AP classes, and girls were supposed to be good and had lots of babies, so people went to school with their grandparents. In many cases, I don't think I'm that old. And you certainly didn't talk about money, and you certainly weren't actually all that ambitious. And so I was lucky enough at this high school that had no AP classes to have a beloved teacher who taught economics. And there were a couple of things that he showed around compounding interest and investing. I was like, wait a second, I actually have a little bit of leftover money. I wonder if I could start saving now and for retirement, if I could maybe have a different situation than my parents. And so that's what I did. And it was purely luck that I was at a rural public school, and I had Mr. Carlson, who brought in some economics and some financial education, and he made it okay to talk about. And those are the kinds of things that I wish every kiddo in a public school had, which they don't in this state. I mean, we're actually last in a couple of things, which we'll talk about. Well, I think we still beat Utah, but that's a whole other story. So I want to talk a little bit about the reality of where we are and the situation that we face. And this is just some of the math. You can see what happens if you save $1, right? Just basic sorts of investment vehicles that you can do. Just another one around how much you need to save for retirement. I think this is the one that I saw, and I was like, well, that starts at 20. If I'm 18, like that could be even better, right? And then this is the reality for women, and you can't take the econ and the math out of the girls. So I know these are a little dense, but I wanted to give you some of the stats. We do live longer than men, so about 6 to 8 years longer. So that means that we need more money for retirement. We tend to earn less and invest less over our lifetimes. And in fact, 80% of men are going to die married, and 80% of women are going to die widowed. So that's why it's so important us to be comfortable talking about wealth and money. And then if you look at some of these compounding interest sorts of things, it does make a difference if we save early. And then the other part is around, we talk about the gender wage gap a lot, which is really important. There's also a gender wealth gap. So we're more likely to hold money in cash. I do this, right? Even though I know these things, I'm like, well, I gotta have some cash. Like, what happens if something falls apart with my business, or I need to take care of my family? These things that are very formative that happen when we are young shape us, and women tend to hold on a little bit more for security. But the interesting thing about that is we actually are better investors. And if you look at the returns we get, we tend to take things that are a little bit less risky and hold them for a longer period of time. So that's important to keep in mind. A lot of this ends up being about confidence, partially because we're told to be good girls and not talk about these sorts of things. So, and the other things with the numbers that are important to know, I think I put some more of these. Oh yeah, it's even worse for moms. We can talk about that over drinks if you want to. You know, we get penalized as soon as we have kids. Men get a bump because they're seen as being the breadwinner and more committed, even though there's research out of the Federal Reserve Bank that shows parents are more productive than their kind of non-parent self, which those of you with kids, you know, like you ruthlessly prioritize once they show up. So it's important to be aware of this as well. And then we're seeing more families where there's women being the breadwinner. There's still some challenges though. So I love that STEM is something women see as an option, and people are rational, they respond to incentives, well, mostly rational. And then, I don't know if people are rational anymore, but people respond to incentives. Let's just use that as a statement. And there's been more scholarships going for diverse talent to go into STEM. That has come at the cost of women going into economics and finance. And people who major in economics and finance end up setting policy, they end up getting investment jobs, they end up deciding what gets funded, and we've seen actually that become whiter and more male, and white men are great too, right? But that you can see some complications from that. If you look at check writing roles in venture capital and private equity, the amount of diversity in those roles, so not just those firms in general, but the people who are deciding who gets money has decreased. If you look at percentage of venture funding dollars that are going to female-founded startups, and you know this well, it was already like 3%, and it's been decreasing, and it's even worse for BIPOC women. And so this is a challenge, and part of it comes from women not being comfortable with economics and with finance. So I'm going to click through a couple of things just quickly, because finance and economics, I'll come back to that. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be, Wall Street is more than just being 6'5", blue-eyed, right, wearing a suit. It can be a great place to go, because it's actually about having an impact. And when I teach at the university, I tend to have lots of, like 10 to 1 men to women in my office hours, and also asking for things like introductions to investors every single week. And I show those numbers in class, and I still don't get as many women asking me for things. But I think what I'm so passionate about with entrepreneurship is we have great companies that have been founded here, and they can create quite a bit of wealth. And the women that come into my classes aren't like the men, which is great, right? They talk about purpose. They talk about wanting to solve problems in a way that creates value. That's awesome. We need some of that. And we have 3 of those people here. I just thought it would be good to look at some of the money. And then you can think about what they've chosen to do with it, and they can do whatever they want, right? Because once you have the wealth, you can decide. So, you know, we're into space. That's cool. We buy some media. That's good. Doing what you do with it. Microsoft, public health, global health, sustainability. Also, Four Seasons hotels, lots of different things they're invested in. Ballmer likes sports. That's also cool. Sports are great, right? We've done some things with USA Facts trying to get transparency. But the point is that by having wealth, we can decide where to make investments in our community. And there's this saying that if you give a woman $1, she'll put it to good use. But if you teach her how money really works, then she can change the world. So And it's okay to talk about that. So I'm going to leave you with just some closing thoughts. This is a nonprofit I'm on the board of, which I'm so grateful for. It's called the Washington Council for Economic and Financial Education. But if you have 4 things that you want to do, let me just leave you with a few things to consider. You can start learning, and please learn from someone who knows what they're talking about, right? There's a lot of people who say they know, like, ask them a few questions before you listen to them. I think the second thing, talk about money. What? Oh, what questions should you ask them? I mean, see if they'll be real. Well, catch me during happy hour, okay? We'll talk more. But I would say, like, make sure that there's some substance and they've actually done some investing or just talking about it. And I'm happy to give lots and lots of recs there, and there's some on the website. I think we should talk about it more, too. I don't know if you don't have to go, like, how much money you have and kind of what your salary is unless you're comfortable with it, but it's okay to talk about saving. It's okay to talk about goals. It's okay about wanting a generational wealth. It's okay to want to invest in your communities, and that's really important. The third thing is you can act. Little actions add up, saving just a little bit at a time, going to speak in a classroom about the importance of money. And then the last thing, I would just encourage all of you to lift as you climb. So for those of you that are working in corporate, encourage the young women to ask to look at the financials or own a profit and loss or talk through the things that you're investing. Because again, I truly think if women controlled more wealth, that we would use it to impact our families and our communities and have a positive impact on the world. So thank you.